Hi, this is Catherine, and this is Taking Tea with Catherine. Today I'm drinking jasmine green tea, which is one of my favorite teas in my never-ending goal of drinking more green tea. Because I like green tea, but I just really like the black teas, like especially the breakfast teas. So sometimes I realize that I like green tea, and I also realize that its health benefits are a little bit more beneficial. So I want to drink more. So this is the best way to do it, is to drink the ones that I love until they run out, which I hope they don't run out soon, but this is entirely possible. I won't run out of black tea anytime soon. Let's hope. So, thought I'd do a Friday reads and a slight check-in. This week I've been doing pretty well. I had a slightly crazy time earlier this week when the weather was absolutely gorgeous, and I realized I still couldn't really enjoy the outdoors because of having to wear protective things. So I didn't really go outside beyond going to each corner of my block at one point in pajamas because, I mean, aren't we all? But yeah, and I managed to stay away from people. But yeah, I have not left my block where I live this entire week for about over a week now, which is a record, I think, for me. Even I think if I've had the flu, I haven't been that long at home. So yeah, we're making some records. But I'm coping. I'm besides the allergies, my health has been pretty decent. My digestion's been a little off, but you don't need to hear about that. And it's about time because I'm eating all kinds of things I shouldn't be eating. I am still exercising at home though. I am. At this point, excuse me again. At this point, I feel like even though I'm doing well, I'm not like I'm sort of like in the middle of the whole situation, but I'm also detached from it in my own way because I'm affected, but like not as directly as some people are. So it feels very much so far, and obviously this could change if I got sick or something happened to anyone else I knew, but it feels a little bit like 9/11 for me, in that back then I lived in New York. Back then I knew a lot of people who worked in the Twin Towers and downtown, and they all had to get out or get away from the building, and they got away safe, and everybody so far is okay. And I didn't lose anybody close to me. And I was affected, obviously, because I live in the city, and everybody was affected, really. But I was at home, so, I was not as affected as a lot of New Yorkers were. So that's how I feel a little bit right now, as I keep clearing my throat. But, so I'm not going to complain. I think I've been okay so far. And I know you guys don't tune in to listen to me ramble on about the corona situation, because that's, books are a little bit of an escape. But I also know that sometimes it's good to just hear what's going on with everybody. And as I live in New York, it's kind of epicenter-y right now. So that's it for how I've been doing in that sense. I've been baking more and cooking more, so I'm going to take advantage of that. I have been dealing with the cat allergies, but otherwise having the cats have been such a pleasure. So that's, again, good things. So I finished a book, and I'm not going to talk about it that much right now because I want to do a tea and mystery, and this is a mystery. So I finished Five Little Pigs finally. I think that was this week. Did I already mention? All the weeks are really flowing into each other at this point. Time is not relevant, but it was a good book, and just not my favorite. But I'll talk about that another time. Tune in. I found a book, and hold on. Just had to find the book. I was looking for another book, and I have like a loungy furniture situation. It's almost like a futon because you can flatten it and make a bed, but it's not really comfortable for sleeping. It is quite comfortable for sitting on and reading. You kind of feel like you're on vacation. And we all need to feel like that sometimes. And the thing is that these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I guess 6 shelves. I don't know. The bottom shelves, the first 2 shelves, are covered by the furniture. So I keep the books there that I don't normally need to look at very much, or that I've not just didn't have any other place for, so I just stuck them there. And I was looking for just a book that had a recipe that I was looking for, which turned out okay. which which I don't need to talk about because it didn't turn out great. So I'm not going to brag. And then I found a couple of books down there that I forgot that I had. As I leaned back, I moved this to a little more prominent area. And that is Mary Ann Thornton by E.M. Forster. So I didn't realize I had this book. I knew I had it because, I recognized the book when I saw it. But, it didn't register at first. Like, it's a biography. I got it in that New York Public Library book sale that I always talk about. But I really miss that sale. I'm sorry. I know it's been over a decade, but I'm obsessed with the fact that this was a great situation. And if we ever get back to whatever normal is and there are libraries and bookshops and stuff left, if anyone ever has power to bring back those kind of sales that, that were wonderful in Manhattan or even Queens. But yeah, Manhattan. If you're listening, please do so. But yeah, so I bought this a long time ago. So I hope to read it one day. I'm trying to figure out maybe a challenge that I can slip that in. But I have other fictional Forster books I'd like to get to first. So we'll see. I have read a good amount of Forster. It's just not all of them. And that's okay. I can't read all of everything. But I also found, and I knew I had this. I recognized it as soon as I saw it. But I have 2 books of Pepys' diary up here. And they don't cover all of his years. I would like to have all of Pepys' diaries, the entire collection, but I'm not rushing to do so. I know I can access the rest online. I don't care for that as much, but I know someone had done a blog of his diaries. Like every day they would do an entry. This was over a decade ago that I found it, so I have to look for it again. How many times am I going to say over a decade ago? But this was a sort of a, as Helene Hanff would say, the busybody editor's version of Samuel Pepys' diary, where it came out, I think, in the 30s. The last person who wrote their name in here was Morton Macmillan Jr. from June 2nd, 1951. So this is quite an older book. It's right before my mom was born, I think. So yeah, this is not a young book. Again, that library sale was amazing. It had all kinds of books like this. More on older books previously owned later. But it took little excerpts of his diaries and put themes to it, different parts of history. And I love history. I like that time period of Pepys' diary, the Restoration and onward, the plague. I don't love the plague, but the fire, all that stuff. And I don't know if he goes into the Glorious Revolution. That might be past. I don't remember specifically right now. But there's a chapter on the plague, and I will read one of his entries, and this is, I'm trying to figure out what year it was. I think it was 1665. There's so much. He ended up going for a while in I should have looked at this a little more carefully. He ended up at some point having to take a not a quarantine, but a sort of escape from the city. I think he ended up in Greenwich or something, or was Woolwich? Either way, what is now basically considered part of London, or at least Greater London, back then was considered out of the city and safety. So he had to get out for a little bit. But this is one thing he wrote that talked a little bit about the plague. And I don't know, I thought it was semi-relevant, although I think they even had much worse as far as death tolls back then, especially considering the population was lower. Anyway, December 31st. Thus ends this year, to my great joy, in this manner. I have raised my estate from £1,300 in this year to £4,400. I don't know the math. I have got myself greater interest, I think, by my diligence, and my employments increased by that of treasurer for Tangier, and surveyor of the victuals. It is true we have gone through great melancholy because of the great plague. I have never lived so merry, besides that I never got so much, as I have done this plague time. My whole family hath been well all this while, and all my friends I know of, saving my Aunt Bell, who is dead, and some children of my cousin Sarah's. Pray God continue the plague's decrease. That is such a weird paragraph, a weird entry, because, it feels almost like he did well with the plague, and then suddenly he mentions having lost some family members. Oh, by the way, some people died. I wonder what was actually going through his head during that time. So, I know that's just one excerpt. I just thought it was interesting. I'm not going to read this cover to cover, just thought I'd look at little bits. And speaking of history, slightly more recent, I've started Rogues Gallery by Michael Gross about the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I'm not loving it yet. I'm up to like page 30-ish, and it's a lot of names being mentioned and trying to keep track of the names. I'm not saying I can't do that. I can. And some of the names I recognize quite well. But I just feel like it's at that part where you're kind of trying to force yourself to focus a little bit. And I did read some reviews, and I don't like to let the reviews get to me too much because they're not like, they're just Goodreads reviews. Not that I'm putting Goodreads reviews down, people. Calm down. But you know what I mean. It's just, it's not like you can write a review in Goodreads and it could be an amazing, well thought out one, or it could be just I didn't like this one. It was boring. You know what I mean? So I don't know how much I can go by their opinion sometimes, Sometimes what I'll do if I really see someone saying something really strongly about something, I will look back to their other reviews and see if they've read other books that I read and see what their opinions were on that. And if they are similar to mine, then I'll probably go a little bit more by what the review says. But I don't make it I don't go crazy looking for everything. Sometimes I just decide to read on. And I don't hate this book yet. But I feel like a lot of the reviews I saw were a little lukewarm. Not as good as I had hoped. But I'm still going to continue. But I feel like it's going to be one of those books that I have in my currently reading that I am reading, but I'm not making rapid progress. And I'm fine with that because there's no rush. I think this year is the 150th anniversary of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's beginnings. And so if I could finish this year, I'm fine with that. And I made good progress. I'm basically about halfway through. Yeah. The Mirror and the Light, finally, by Hilary Mantel. Again, another one I'm taking my time in, but I don't want to take too much time in. I just know that I'm reading the end of Thomas Cromwell's life, and though I really wanted to get out of the year 1536, which this book went on for a long time in, and now I'm in 1537, I kind of still feel a little sad that that I know that right now he's at his highest point in life, but it's going to come crashing down, and it's going to be sad seeing whatever betrayals happen. Knowing what I know about Thomas Cromwell, which is basic history, I'm not saying that I agreed with everything he did. He had some really good causes, but in those days it was a really ruthless situation. You had to, if you were in a position of power, you had to hold on to that by any means necessary, and you were living in service of a king that was also, especially at this point, because before he got injured and hurt his leg to the point that he had ulcerated leg wounds that he was never the same again, before that, he was still a tyrant in his own way, and he still made a lot of decisions that weren't quite nice, but he seemed a little more of a reasonable, jolly king, and at this point he had gotten to being not so good. And so, yeah, you never knew where you stood with Henry VIII. So if you were someone like Thomas Cromwell and you saw people rise and fall, you never knew where you were going to be. I know that when he had to deal with the fall of Anne Boleyn, which he basically orchestrated, I know that part of it was because he was doing what the king wanted. Part of it was because he felt threatened by Anne. At some point, they were, on the same side, and then suddenly Anne seemed to maybe be turning on him, and, it could have been a dangerous situation for him. So, Thomas Cromwell did a lot of things that I do not approve of, but I also see why in that time period one would do something like that. I would hope never to be a person but I wouldn't be in that position of power anyway, so thankfully that wouldn't have to be me. I find it interesting because he's talking to so many people, in his dealings with everybody that are important, and some people that come in later that I didn't expect to see yet. For instance, he's already had conversations with Catherine Parr, who didn't become the queen, Henry VIII's last queen, until a little while after Thomas Cromwell was already dead. But at this point, she's still Lady Latimer, and the Pilgrimage of Grace, which I talked about last time, affected her family a little bit. So, there was that. But I have to say, Catherine Parr is one of my favorite queens of Henry VIII. Just her life was just so interesting. She, uh, you know, she did outlive him, sort of, but I mean, nobody's life was really great in that situation. But she was at a point where she was married to the king. She had published her own book. I think she might be one of the first queens or even women, basically, back then, who published a book in England. I don't know. It was a pretty big deal. She was very, she had strong religious beliefs and opinions, but even though Henry had made a lot of changes, he was not really that much of a in her set of beliefs. So there were enemies at court that were trying to bring her down because they didn't want that direction to be taken. So it got to the point where there was I think it was a warrant or something out for her arrest that he had to he could have signed, and she could have been put in the Tower, and goodness knows what could have happened to her. But somehow she got a hold of it or found out about it before it was, I guess, signed. And she just threw herself at the king's mercy and just explained what was behind it, and just, I was just trying to argue about things because I saw that you were, sometimes not feeling well, and I wanted just to keep you, your mind off of it or something to that. But the fact is that who knows why all that happened, that Henry would have even let it get to that point, because why? But it's not like he needed any more heirs, and he wasn't about to try really at that point in his life. He was pretty sick. But yeah, she managed to basically talk him out of any other moves he would have made against her, which what other queen was really able to do that? Even the queens like Catherine Aragon had a lot of good arguments, and nope. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing about her. Also, I don't know, I just like reading about smart women. So I do like the fact that she showed up. I don't know as much about Tudor history as the experts. I don't know how many dealings Cromwell would have had with Catherine Parr. We don't know. Or at least I don't know right now. Always an excuse to read more. One of the things I find interesting when I'm reading about Tudor history, and this is just coming from me, and I'm very much a Jane Austen fan, in case you haven't noticed, but I noticed that when I'm reading about Tudor history at all, so many names of that time were names that Jane Austen used later on in her writings. And I know a lot of those names were just probably noble names that she must have heard a lot, so they're easy enough to pick. But there are just so many. In this book, we recently had someone whose name was Darcy. And I know earlier on in the Tudor history there was a Willoughby, Ferrers. I'm forgetting them right now because of course I'm forgetting them. But I'm telling you, whenever I read English history, whenever I read Tudor history, there always seems to be a name that pops up at any point that I'm like, I wonder if that's where Jane Austen got the name from. I don't know. Maybe not, because maybe they were just names that were common at the time. And maybe even now. I don't know. I don't live in England, and I don't live in Regency England, so who knows. But anyway, I like to make those connections because they're nerdy, and what else am I going to do? So, another book I started, and this one I made, I would say, quicker progress in that in less than a day I've read over 50 pages, which I've not been a fast reader lately, so that's good. And that is Brought Farrar by Josephine Tay, and she's a semi-well-known mystery writer. She died a little bit young-ish, in her early 50s, pretty young. And she was a pretty private person. I don't know much about her. I think she was from Scotland originally. But I read The Daughter of Time, which is a great book. And this one is not very similar at all because it doesn't talk anything about Richard III. But it does get into inheritance a little bit. I'm only just at the beginning, but most of the plot is already mentioned in the back. There's a family that there's children. Their parents died in an accident, and the oldest son. There was I think it's 4 children, and I think they're both sets of twins, 2 boys, 2 girls, I think, and maybe one other person, maybe one other sister, I think. Again, I just started this book, but the oldest son seems to have killed himself. That's the idea, or drowned by accident. They don't really know. They think that maybe he killed himself. There's whole reasons why, but I don't want to get into everything. So the younger twin is up for inheriting right now everything, and they're not super rich, but they have an estate, whatever. And this guy comes out of nowhere, this Brut Farrar, claiming to be the dead son, Patrick. And what's going to happen? So it's an interesting thought. I kind of like these ideas of people pretending to be someone else, and are they going to pull it off? Should they be able to pull it off? What's going to happen to this family? Seems very English right now, which I still like, even though I'm sad about not having gone this year. Whatever. But I find it to be a enjoyable, quick-ish read that I feel like is going to be a nice weekend endeavor. So that is probably enough for my weekend. I think that if I just focus on these books, I will enjoy my reading for the next weekend. But I'm still kind of thinking about different books I'd like to start. I still have a chunk of books on my April TBR that I'm sitting right next to right now that I'm saying, oh, which one should I start? I'm kind of thinking, because today is the anniversary, because I am remembering some dates of when my family first took home my cat Cinnamon, our very first family cat. And I thought it'd be nice to maybe start The Catman of Gotham, Tales of Feline Friendships in Old New York by Peggy Gavin, which is a book that I've been dying to read. I thought maybe I shouldn't read two books at the same time about New York. Will I get names mixed up? But maybe not. This is a different kind of story. So maybe I will actually start this. Because it just seems peaceful. And, I remember going into my TBR, I was saying, I don't know if I really want to read a cat book after having lost Janie. And now that Janie's back, I have no excuse. And again, I bought this book full price. It would be good to read it already. I bought it at Astoria Bookshop, which is not open right now, which I'm very sad about. So if you guys ever have a chance to order from them online, I don't know if they can do that right now, but even after they open, please try to, or visit them if you're in the area of Astoria, because we got to keep these bookshops open somehow. Hypocritically, though, over a week ago, I ordered a bunch of books online from Book Outlet, etc. So I had a moment of stress and weakness, and they're not in yet because everything's taking a billion years. But when they are, you have a haul to look forward to. I don't know if you're happy about that, because I know we should be supporting the independent bookshops, but I do. This is proof that I support my independent bookshops. I just want to look crazy. And hopefully not too crazy. So we're reaching the over 20-minute point now, so I think we should stop now. And I hope you've enjoyed this coverage of the books that I've been reading and plan to read this weekend and maybe upcoming week. This has been Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book filled day. Goodbye.